Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Witching Hour. I am Patti Negri, psychic medium and good witch, and your host for this hour journey into the other worlds. You might recognize me from my regular appearances on Ghost Adventures or other shows or my appearances, but this is my baby. This is the Witching Hour. When is the witching hour, you say? Well, actually, it's late at night, about 3 a.m., when the veil between the worlds is the thinnest. But this witching hour is whenever you happen to be catching this podcast. This witching hour, I bring you the best of the best in magic, witchcraft, the occult, the best from all over the world. And today I've got somebody I am so excited to get to know because I think we have kind of similar magic here, and she's really accomplished and been doing it a long time. So let me introduce you to Heron Michelle. Heron is a witch, priestess, artist, and mom. She's the founding high priestess of the Sojo Circle Coven, having created a training program in modern witchcraft and is taught publicly since 2010. Heron is the owner of Sojourner Whole Earth Provisions, metaphysical shop, a Reiki master, tarot diviner, and clairvoyant, specializing in past life retrieval. She writes a blog, Witch on Fire, at Patheos Pagan, and regularly lectures at local universities, festivals, and conferences. And so she could explain it much better than I just did. Welcome, Heron. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on. I'm so excited to talk to you, truly. So just before I even get into, tell us about, you have a new book coming out, right? It's Elemental Witchcraft. Want to tell us about that a little bit?
Yes. Haha. Advanced copy. It's called Elemental Witchcraft, a guide to living a magical life through the elements. It's the first of 3 volumes in a series that I call the Pentacle Path, which introduces the sort of foundation stones, the theology, the ethics, the basics of what makes this path of modern witchcraft what it is. And then from there goes very practical and deeply into what I call the sideways of the middle world. Getting used to where you live right here on Earth. It's all based in the sort of typical 3-world model, where there's the heavens or the spiritual realms and the astral realms, and then there's the middle world of the Earth. And I figure what better place to start than where you live right now, right here in your gorgeous body, getting used to being a human being effectively on Earth. And how do we do that? Well, if you have any alchemy mixed up in your practice, any Hermetic philosophy mixed up in your practice, that's where we get earth, air, fire, and water, and all the relative lore that comes with it. So working heavily with that magic.
I love it. I love it because that is exactly my philosophy too. As of now, we are on this earth and we were given all these beautiful qualities and abilities and attributes to do with. So let's work with those until we get into those other worlds, even use them to navigate. So again, I'm so excited about your book. I know you have quite a history of growing up in evangelical churches in the South and then Muslim country. You went to Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. So how did you end up this little witchy in the U.S.?
Good question. Yeah, so I'm a Southern girl, good old Southern girl. I was raised mostly in Taylor, South Carolina, which is just outside Greenville, South Carolina. That is in the shadow of several large fundamentalist evangelical universities and things like that, like Bob Jones University. So it was a pretty conservative Southern Baptist background for a lot of that time. My mother was very serious about her faith, which I guess is to her credit, except that we disagree on just about everything else. But I was raised in, and I quote her, the fear and admonition of the Lord. I know, fear and admonition. I'm being admonished. I'm a naughty little girl all the time. But she was a very loving person. I had a loving home, but that's just what they were all raised in. They didn't know any better. And then when I was in the 4th grade, about this time of year in the 4th grade, my father relocated my mom and sister and I to join him in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. He was in construction and he had been there for a little while and wanted us to come over there with him. And so from 4th through 6th grades, I spent in 30 minutes away from the holy city of Mecca.
Wow.
Right. And this was in the early mid 80s. So, that is a theocracy. It Sharia law, ruled by a king. There's no Bill of Rights. Women have very few rights. Westerners, not particularly loved at the time. So it was sort of dangerous. I learned a lot about how you really, really, really want separation of church and state. I came to appreciate the Bill of Rights, and personal liberties. So anyway, we left in the 6th grade. I come back as a 13-year-old woman, girl. I was a girl. And I have to say it was very impactful on me. When you become the minority. I mean, and look at me. There's nothing minority about me besides my being female. But when you are suddenly yanked from that place of privilege, the American has definitely, there's so many privileges to just be American in the West. And then you're dropped in a spot where they could deport you in a hot minute. They could just throw you in jail without a phone call if they don't like where you're standing. Our religion of Christianity at the time was, of course, not allowed. And so I learned a lot about the necessity of these sorts of personal sovereignties and freedoms and that kind of thing from, having been denied them. So that was impactful. But also I realized there's more than one way to live, that we all, need to respect the cultures and identities of other people, meet them where they're at. You can't just run around imposing your way on everybody. By the same token, don't let them in. I don't really want other people to impose their way on me either. Right. So I don't know. And I got back home about the time I was in middle school, and I had some really transformative spiritual experiences during that time. And a lot of people do. I think a lot of young witches awaken to something. They maybe not know what to call it, but their otherness, their a deeper awareness or a connection or something beyond the mundane that is. It happens a lot, I believe, around that time of Menarche, Yeah. And I also had one of those experiences because I was in a terrible existential crisis when I got home, because I did not believe. I did not take it face value as this is how you should believe of the paradigm, the Judeo-Christian paradigm as it had been taught to me. It just didn't feel right. Right. Never had felt right. And interestingly, and more interesting even than where I grew up, I have always had past life memories since I was a little kid. They were traumatic, actually. And I believe that a lot of my weirdness as a kid was actually PTSD from remembering how I died in my previous life. And so that was also impactful. But I was a man in my previous life. I was a soldier, and I died in World War I. I know the specific thing, tell you exactly how it happened, but I won't. I won't go. But it definitely gives you a different perspective on what spirit and life really means when you remember these things so clearly. And so the messages I was being taught in church didn't make sense, though it's a one-way deal, one shot. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I was in crisis a lot as a kid because I would listen in church quite often. And it was a hellfire and brimstone church, screaming and ranting and raving and, threats of hell and all that. And I'm like, that just, and the one moving experience that I had in a Christian church was when on a Valentine's Day, the pastor switched gears and spoke about the love, divine love. And that message can also be in that tradition. It is there, but it hadn't often been talked about. And that one moved me. I was like, yes, divine love. Yes, that part moved me. And so for a long time, I'm like, oh, okay, well, there's this. And then it was later when I was like 13, I'm like, if that's true, if all that hellfire and brimstone and damnation, and of course, the other thing, of course, is, they were a pray away the gay kind of church. Yeah. You weren't allowed to be anything but. And here I have memories of formerly being a man. And I'm confused. I'm a little confused about all this stuff. And I'm like, oh no. Anyway, I just decided one night that it couldn't be true. It's like, nope, this is not how divinity would be. The divine love is the only thing that makes sense to me. None of this damnation stuff. I just can't do it. And I just decided because I was still in that all or nothing headspace that they teach you in these fundamentalist churches. I was like, well, I don't accept any of it. So I'm not going for all of it. So I'm going to go for nothing. And I was like, well, no, if there's nothing, then that's sad. Because I did have a sense of spirit and love in my, and I was just kind of depressed about it, I guess. And I was laying in bed one night and I was like, nah, that's it. There's no God. There's no divinity. I'll just be an atheist. And all of a sudden I feel like the full moon crawled in my window and filled the whole room. Divine presence just filled the whole room. I felt like I was floating and being crushed at the same time. And I've come to realize that whenever I am in the presence of divinity that has awakened in that spot, like, when you do a good solid invocation and they're there, it feels like you're squished in a tube and ecstatic and floating in the size of the cosmos at the same time.
Yep.
Recognize that now. But that's the way I felt right then. And it sort of paralyzed me. And I could just hear this chorus of divinity in my head. And it was ecstasy and terrifying. And I was like, oh, and I couldn't move and I'm struggling. But it really felt like the moonlight. The moonlight was singing to me. And then I finally am like, okay. I believe there is something. And it all went back to normal. And I'm just sort of panting and I'm in a cold sweat, but I can move around. And I sit up and I look and I'm like, oh my gosh, did the moon just come in my window? Mind you, I'm 13 and confused. And I'm like, okay, that was crazy. That did not just happen. And I lay back down and I'm like talking myself out of it. Nope. I made that up. That didn't happen. And I'm here to tell you the whole thing 10 times stronger than the first time. Rocked my world. I was suddenly cast, I guess. I was felt anchored in a frozen paralyzed body, but at the same time floating throughout the whole cosmos, and this like vision unfurled of all these things, like I'm being shown. And there was this sort of chorus of guiding voices, and it just became this sort of question, answer, guided visualization thing of, I don't know, how the cosmos works, and I don't know, the future, the past, whatever. And I remember hearing this voice, and it's not like it had an identity. There was no introduction, like, hi, I'm Aphrodite, nice to meet you. I mean, that would have been really convenient, but I didn't get that. I got a chorus and just wake up. Yeah, be present. Here we are. Do it. That kind of an idea. Anyway, that's where I've been ever since.
That is amazing. And somehow that led you to an elemental pagan witch path of singing choruses of, I love it.
So by the time I was 18, I found a book, an early pagan book, one of those really terrible ones from the 80s. I won't even name it because I
have them all.
Yeah, right. But it was the first time that somebody introduced this sort of Wiccan alchemical idea of Earth is, like mountains in the north, and air is like atmosphere, and birds and something in the east, that kind of thing, fire and water. And it associated it also with Wiccan altar tools, this little book. And I was so entranced by these symbols. But for some reason, it never occurred to me that it was modern. I was so indoctrinated to the idea that pagans and witchcraft and magic were a dead thing of the past or a fantasy, that I thought I was reading a book about ancient something or fantastical something. But I started working this imagery into some embroidery I was doing and into artwork, and I started to doodle it all the time. When it kind of captures your imagination and suddenly you're just in it all the time. And from there, it was so funny. So this is South Carolina, in the shadow of some scary fundamentalist stuff. And I happened to be at an event. It was kind of like a Renaissance fair little thing. And I was doing this little embroidery, and I still have it actually. I should have pulled it out to show you. But anyway, little embroidery, and all it was a circle divided into quarters with a little mountain and a little clouds and air. But I had the colors, and the fire and the water, and a little cup. A little wand, little blade. And a fellow walks by and he goes, oh, nice embroidery. So you're a pagan too? And I went, Because in my head, in church, pagans were devil worshippers. They were evil people. They were satanic, right? Because that's how they pitch it in the church.
Right.
And I was like, why would you say that? And he goes, never mind. I'm sorry. Just you do you. I'll be over here, and he wanders on. And he looked like such a nice guy, right? Like he was so sweet. He was unassuming. He had a great energetic feel to him. He was an older person, and he just seemed nice. And I just all day long I kept looking at him like, why would he ask me that? Why would he ask me that? And I finally approached one of his friends. Why would he ask me that? He goes, I don't know. Ask him. He's the Wiccan priest. And that's the first time I'd ever even heard those words.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, my mother raised me under a rock. Well, okay, except for the fact that we went to Saudi Arabia. But that was a rock we were underneath. And I felt like I just got thrown onto an alien planet, finding out that these things. Anyway, eventually we made friends. And he was a great influence on me for a while there. He loaned me the classics, Starhawk's Spiral Dance and Margaret Adler's Drawing Down the Moon. Mind you, those were either new or in their, like the 10th anniversary edition was out that year.
Right.
And there it began. There it went. I was 18, out of the house. I went to college at Marlborough College in Southern Vermont to get away. I was like, surely there are witches in New England. So, Surely. And so first thing I do when I get there, I see a fellow wearing a pentacle necklace. Oh, tell me about that. And he loaned me more books. He loaned me Janet and Stuart Farrar's The Witch's Bible Complete, and a couple other things. Anyway, we got to talking. Anyway, that's been me since 18.
That is beautiful, and you are so public with it, and you have your own school, you have your own classroom, so that's amazing. So one of the questions I see that you have, what is in your book? You introduced the Witch's Jewel of Power. Now, I don't know what that is. What is the Witch's Jewel of Power?
Okay, well, it is a thing that I am introducing to the witchery for your review and consideration.
I love it.
It is a progression of some symbolic systems around the elements that have long existed. You may have heard of it referred to as the four powers of the Sphinx, or the Sphinx, the powers of the Magus. Those are from Eliphas Levi. That in Transcendental Magic. And then later, once it sort of merged with modern witchcraft, it was referred to often as the Witch's Pyramid. Christopher Penczak, for example.
Yes.
Pyramid. So once it got into Wicca and it was made into a pyramid, that allowed for the top point, which was assigned to spirit, much like, the pentacle has 5 points and the spirit points. So let's put that on a pyramid also. And then in every book I read in the 90s and aughts that mentioned it, spirit what was its lesson? Oh, so to back up, the 4 corners, to know, to will, to dare, to be silent, or to keep silent. So those were the maxims of magic to create. And in the top point, once spirit was added, what's the maxim? What's the message of spirit? And it was the Wiccan Rede. Do as you will, so as you harm none, or however you want to phrase that. Okay, so I loved it. Taught it, worked it. That was my symbol set, Okay, so then I read a book by author Timothy Roderick. Now, he's written the foreword to my book. Thrilled to have Timothy Roderick write the foreword of my book. He wrote several great books. I actually read them out of order, but the first one I read that introduced additional lessons of the elements was his book, Wicca, A Year and a Day in the Craft of the Wise. It's sort of a self-study program. Now, mind you, I'm a self-initiatory, did it on my own path, which, and Christopher Penczak's series, the Temple series, and Timothy Roderick's books were basically my textbooks, among many others, but they each laid them out in lessons. So that's what I did with a group. It was like a book club thing, Anyway, Timothy Roderick introduced what he called the passive lessons, so that the ones that we're familiar with, to know, to will, to dare, etc., those were the active, or what I call the projective lessons, the main obvious lessons of each element. But he's a psychoanalyst, That's what he does for a living. He's, clinical psychologist. He says, well, if the principle of polarity, which is also integral to all this, if that's to be believed, and everything that has its obvious strength also has the polar opposite lesson. They must be held in a range of polarity. There must be both sides. If this has a projective lesson, it must also have a hidden deeper meaning that it is receptive or it's passive lesson. Or he referred to them in an earlier work, which I recommend everybody read. It's from the late 90s, but it's when he introduced these concepts. It's called Dark Moon Mysteries. It's great. Anyway, he called them, if the main lessons were the Jedzel spirals, the downward flowing spiral of energy, there must also be a Wittershan spiral, inward flowing, reflective inner lesson. So anyway, he never talked about pyramids. He didn't try to put it in a symbol set. He just said, here's the flip side. And I found so much power in those lessons, so much power. And so one year, I believe it was 2012, I dedicated my great work of magic, which is basically, I set a dedication at Imbolc, and then I pursue that question or that area of magic. I practice it for the whole year.
Wow.
And I've been doing this for years. And that particular year, I was led by Spirit to ask the question, wait a minute, what's up with all these receptive lessons? If to know has the flip side of to wonder, and if to will has the flip side of to surrender, and daring is to accept, and to be silent or to resonate or set your own frequency, how do those fit on a pyramid, right? If there's an upward pointing pyramid, there must be a downward pointing pyramid, right? And if there is, what's the downward point of Spirit's got to say? What's the opposite message of do as you will but harm none? What's down here? So I made that my dedication.
Wow.
And I studied the heck out of it. And I followed the thread back and I'm like, where did this come from? And it took me a while to realize, and I actually reached out to Timothy Roderick via Facebook Messenger because I had been in one of his study groups. But no, that came later. I found him and I was like, was it you? Was it you that put this information out there? Because I couldn't find his stuff anywhere else in any occult book. And I was like, was it you? And he goes, yeah, I introduced those for consideration by the witch community in a previous work called Dark Moon Mysteries. And as it happens, he did a little drawing on his Facebook, and anybody who joined his page or whatever, he put your name in a hat to win a book. And he sent me a copy of Dark Moon Mysteries, and it was already on my shelf. And he goes, yeah, that was me. I did it in Dark Moon Mysteries. I presented it there, and I went and pulled it out and found it. I'm like, oh, so basically Spirit provided to me the source I was looking for without me asking.
Wow.
I know, it's kind of magical. Oh, everything's magical.
Everything's magical. Yeah, me too. Everything's magic.
Everything's magic. Anyway, so I worked that whole mystery for a year, and then it occurred to me that if there's an upward pointing pyramid with projective lessons and a downward pointing pyramid with receptive lessons, and I had originally thought, well, like the Seal of Solomon, or the Star of David, it's a 6-pointed star, which is made of 2 triangles that intersect, right? The chalice and the blade.
Yep.
The upward pointing one is the blade, and the downward pointing one is like the chalice. And so in Wicca, when we do the blessing of the cup and we merge the two, it's like saying I'm reconciling my completeness within Spirit. I have my projective God side and I have my receptive goddess side. But I had been sort of facing them towards each other. Right? Like they're coming at each other. Goddess and God, get together.
Yeah.
Through a lot of revelation and a lot of really cool divine stuff happening, it occurred to me as I studied the Hermetic philosophies that they don't come towards each other. They are reflections of each other. And what do you call it when you put a pyramid flat base to flat base up and down? It's a new symbol called the Octahedron. Would you like to see a drawing?
I would love to see a drawing of it.
Okay, so see that?
Beautiful.
That is called the Witch's Jewel of Power. And it's basically an octahedron, which is a diamond shape, right? 3D diamond. It's a jewel. And Christopher Penczak had always taught in his books, like Outer Temple, he talks about how divinity is like a multifaceted jewel. And he called it the diamond of divinity. And then I started really working with that symbol. Oop, I have a kitty cat who's going to try to introduce herself.
Oh, good. We like kitties.
Here. This is Bella.
Hi, Bella. What a beauty.
Bella Luna, because I adopted her on the full moon. Okay, go
beautiful.
On. Anyway, I really started working with this symbol and really, how does it work? What does it look like? If you take an octahedron that's like open wire work, you know, like you could just the lines like that picture was, and you rotate it just so that you're looking down on it from a 45-degree angle, it will suddenly be a Star of David, a Seal of Solomon, if you were to connect the lines around the outside.
Right.
That's
wow.
And all the old occultists in every old book talks about these mysteries by looking down on it, and it's a 2D thing, and it looks like the two intersecting triangles with the lines around the outside. And I'm like, I see that symbol everywhere. That just happens to be what an octahedron looks like if you flatten it out by looking at it at this angle. Well, I'm going to make it 3D again. And I'm going to add the upper, you know, the upper mysteries, they ascend, the divine masculine in the Hermetic paradigm, the Hermetic Creation story is called the Pymander.
Mm-hmm.
It says that as the creation happens, there's a separation, and the divine light and air and fire, and they rise, they ascend, and the watery dark substance of the goddess descends. And as they part, there is this echoing cry, as if it pains them to be separated. But they rise, she descends and he rises. And then they fall in love with each other again, and he chooses to descend and join her, and she wraps around him in her watery substance and gives him form. And they were one, they separated, realized they fell in love with each other, and then they merge again into one being. It's a beautiful story. I tell it in my book, and then I basically base everything off of that. But they are a reflection of each other. They are one being reflecting each other, and they have projective attributes that we call masculine, just because, you know,
right?
Because they're aggressive and whatever, thinky and they doey. And then there's the receptive attributes, all this compassion and molding of the goddess. But they are one being, and everything in the world is created by their merging. And so everything has the full range of all possibility, the full spectrum, anchored by goddess on one side and God on the other, but it's a spectrum, a rainbow spectrum between them. And so anyway, the Jewel of Power just illustrates that for me. The four corners remain, the earth, air, fire, and the rising from that point is their projective lesson. The descending from that point is their receptive lesson. And which brings us to the question of what's the bottom vertices? What is goddess's spirit lesson? It took me a year of very deep magical work and divination and journeying, and I don't know, my whole life's an open prayer. But I feel confident that the lesson is perfect love and perfect trust, the two keys to the temple. So the top spirit lesson is, what do you personally need to be doing, right? How do I go about taking care of me? You know,
yeah.
Do as you will, but harm none.
Yeah.
Okay. Get down in the goddess's territory. What does Mama say about what should I do? And she wants to talk to us about how we interact with our community. How do we interlace with nature? How do we interlace with other people? What kind of responsibility do we take? Not just for ourselves, but how we impact everyone else. And in Wicca, the two keys to enter the temple were in perfect love and perfect trust, or my preferred way of saying that, perfect trustworthiness, because it's about you. And I believe that was the lesson. So the whole book is basically laying that out.
That, I'm just sitting here picturing going, that makes so much sense. Why didn't somebody think of this billions of years ago? So to me, that means there's such a pure truth there. I can't wait to write, and I love it. And who doesn't like jewels? And jewels are about the reflection, and they're about all of that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So listen in, my people. We all need to get that jewel, the witch's jewel of power. Now, you mentioned back a little bit about Aphrodite. So you say that the goddess Aphrodite revealed to you the 9 divine love conditions.
Yes.
So how did that happen?
Okay, so back to the great work intention every year. Like I said, every year after Samhain, I sort of reflect back over the year before, and then after I integrate and really sit for a bit on what I may have learned in my previous work, then I start to sort of cast my eyes into the darkness, closer to Yule, like, hey, well, what do you want me to do now? Inevitably, it's like fireworks. Everything's magic. We just said that.
Yep.
Everything is like fireworks once you start living this sort of open, like everything in your life is an open conversation with divinity. It's an open prayer, it's an open dialogue. So you're like, all right, well, what's next? Now what? And breadcrumbs just start landing, right? Things just start lighting up. Oh, omens and synchronicities and things. Well, one year after I had done that one, it was this, so that was 12. This is 14 at this point. And 2014 was a very interesting year for me, because I thought that the message that I needed to learn was, what do you mean by unconditional love? Because what do you mean by perfect? Because that's some freighted concepts right there. That's problematic to deal with in modern contexts. And I happened to have been at the time in a relationship, and at that winter solstice, became engaged to be handfasted the following Beltane. So I felt like what I needed to discover that year is how are we supposed to live in perfect love and trust when we are human beings, not divine beings? Well, inherently divine, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's different when we're down here in the illusion of separateness. It is not the same as being in the oneness of spirit. Okay, so there are conditions to relationships. Definitely need conditions. But how are we supposed to behave in loving relationship with other people? So this was my study. And I also thought, well, I'm planning a hand fasting, so let's have a year full of Valentine's days. Won't that be nice? So I stood at an altar at Immolch with the full Monty of candles and poppets and bags and boxes and whatever. I did all the magic to embody love, to learn about love, human love, not just romantic love, all the love. And called upon the goddesses of love, grace, and beauty to aid me. Any of them, hey, goddesses of love, grace, and beauty. And I named a few, right? But I was like, I'm seeking guidance and inspiration. I'm calling upon whoever wants to work with me. And who answered was Aphrodite. Figured that out later. But the following Friday happened to be the full moon on a Friday on exact Valentine's Day. So I happened to do some more love spell work with my fiance to hope to open any roads, remove impediments, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Very powerful magic to our marrying. We lived in separate states at the time. There was a lot to overcome. Okay. Within 3 weeks, we were broken up. Wow. It was the sweetest, most respectful, loving disentanglement from another human being that could be. But both of us, over the course of 3 weeks to like 2 months, it was a little bit of a dissolving, but it was, I love you and all, but this is not right. Bye-bye. It was just this kind of, we're out. And I was so shook. So this is the story. I was so shook that it just ended like that. And I'm like, yes, and I agreed that it should, but wow. That I really just sort of was I was depressed, and I abandoned my normal working stuff. I wasn't really paying attention. I wasn't really meditating. I was just kind of being a big old bum, just being sad. And I swear I hadn't, there for a couple of months, I hadn't been in my altar room. I mean, the altar is cold and offerings are dry. It's just sad. It was just sad. And I'm just getting through. And one night, this is the funny story. So this is a story I called That Time Aphrodite Blew Up My Altar. So one night I made dinner for my kids, nothing special. Went back in, noticed that there was a crack in my ceramic cooktop through the burner. And that was a bummer. Next night I cooked another meal on a different burner. There's a crack through the cooktop when I come back later. That's a bummer. Third night, I go to turn on the wall oven. The wall oven is on the wall opposite my altar. Turned it on to preheat. I'm making little baby pizzas for everybody. And I'm here to tell you the largest explosion, a calamity. It sounded like a piece of furniture fell down in my altar room. Smash, boom, crash, glasses going. It was a big old thump. Everybody comes running. I got 2 kids at that time that were like 12 and 10 or something. We all come running, have to turn on the light. And my altar doors, this cabinet right here behind me, that have a really heavy lock thing on the door, the cabinet, where you have to pull real hard to get the door open. The doors are standing wide open. The contents have sprayed into the room in broken glass pattern that goes 6-7 feet across the carpet in a spray pattern. All the contents from one of the shelves have been swiped out across the room and things are crushed, broken everywhere.
Wow.
And at first I'm like, the cat? You know, did the cat get in the cabinet? I just tell the kids not to come in so as not to cut themselves. And I go back to making the dinner. Here's the thing that's interesting. So I'm standing there and I'm like, what in the world just happened? And I'm laying out the toppings and I'm working my way down into like a clairvoyant state, right? Like I'm really deeply thinking. And all of a sudden it occurs to me, fruit, the kids need fruit. And I just grab an apple out of the bowl and I cut it, but I cut it transversely, like through the fat part where you can see the pentacle of the seed in the middle. Yeah. Why did I do that? I never cut a fruit to eat that way. I go the other way. And I open it up and it's a brand new apple, just bought it. It's beautiful, bright, shiny red on the outside. I open it and it is rotten from skin to skin. The whole thing is just dark brown. One giant bruise with the pentacles shining up in it. And I went, ugh! And that's when the floaty thing happened again. I am suddenly compressed, like I'm in a vacuum, and I am expansive and floating, and I lose all sense of where I am in the world. And I hear in my head the largest screaming chorus of, things are not as they seem. And I'm like, ugh! Okay. And I suddenly am released, and I put the apple down and I run back in the room and I look. There is broken glass all the way to the back of the cabinet, right? So it's not like things smashed when they hit the floor. And the thing that is lying on the floor and perfectly upright, right beneath where the problem started, the point of the spray, is my fire candle. The fire candle that I used at Emol and for that love spell. And as it happens, and this is a way I say a lot that I've learned things the stupid way in magic. Here's a story. So Dorothy Morrison makes a line of candles, and there's one called Red Stilettos, where she promises, it's a love spell candle. She promises wild, hot jungle sex. And I had previously used this candle in some love spell work. And then I was engaged. Anyway, it didn't need it anymore, so I repurposed it as a fire candle. Don't recommend that. Just let it be. Find something fresh. But anyway, so this is the candle I had used in that magic, and it had been put in the back of the cabinet, and it pushed its way out and landed on the floor, and anything that was in its way was smashed and thrown across the room. I pick up the candle. I call on fire. Fire, am I hearing that I need to be doing something right now, applying my will to something? Or anyway, I light it and I'm like, fire, is that you? And my daughter from her bedroom, she's 12, screams, Bella's tail is on fire. That cat that was just here. I take off running and I get there just in time to see that the cat, whose big fluffy tail is on fire, has just jumped on her seat by the curtains. And my daughter rushes over a brave thing and grabs her tail by the base and just shucks it up really high and snuffs the fire with her hand and saves the curtain, saves the cat. She didn't get hurt. And I'm just standing there going, okay, I need to get back to doing things now. They're calling me. And from that moment on, I returned to the work. Okay, whoever's working with me, I hear you. What do I need to know about perfect love? And from that moment on, every day felt like I'm both being squished and expanded. Every day was like a machine gun of signs and synchronicities and omens. And the way I was taught what things are, the things that we feel as divine love, what would divine love look like to a person? I would find out what it is by being denied that thing. It would suddenly be taken away from me. Some crazy thing would happen, or I would, and then I would feel so hurt, or I would feel so confused or whatever. And finally I would say, are you telling me that we need to treat each other with this thing in order to feel your love? And she'd be like, yes, you got it. And we'd move on. And suddenly that problem wouldn't be there anymore. It would resolve and a new problem would show up. It was comical how obvious. It's like people were coming to my door just to teach me a lesson about all that time. And in the end, do you want to hear what they are? Preview?
Yes, please.
Love conditions as revealed to me by Aphrodite between my altar blowing up, which was in like June or July, I think, and the following Mabon of autumnal equinox was this. So if I feel divine love, I have the resources I need to survive. To ensure my physical, I'm going to read you a little bit from the book. Is that okay?
Please. Oh, I would, yes.
It's basically a list, but I'll just read it. Number 1, the first divine love condition is resources. I have what I need to ensure my physical survival and comfort. Clean air and water, nourishing food, safe shelter and clothing to protect me from the elements, and access to health care. I have no fear of suffering. 2, affection. I have access to the kind of desired physical intimacy that I prefer to share with other people, and I have no fear of abandonment. 3, free will. I have agency and sovereignty to pursue happiness as I see fit, and am treated with dignity and respect. I have no fear of oppression. 4, acceptance. I am accepted as my whole authentic self. I have no fear of bigotry. 5, security. I have safety on all levels. Boundaries are honored and privacy is respected. I have no fear of violation. Trustworthiness. I can rest assured that those around me and my environment can be trusted not to harm me. I have no fear of duplicity. 7, expression. My input is registered and honored as a valuable contributor. I have no fear of disenfranchisement. 8, authenticity. The outward declaration of any circumstance is the actual truth without deception. I have no fear of exploitation. And 9, reciprocity. There is a two-way street of trustworthiness between myself and the world around me. With mutual care that all beings have these 9 divine love conditions, I have no fear of betrayal.
Wow.
So, to me, that is divine love. If the goddess, see, I'm a panentheist, which is to say that I believe spirit is inherent within nature and also transcendent.
Me too.
Yes.
Yes.
The only obvious thing. So, so if the goddess is everything, they are also the food on the plate and the roof over your head, and the fact that you get to cast your vote, and the fact that you get to make love with someone, and they are everything. And so it's not just feelings we're talking about, right? And how are we supposed to interact with each other in perfect love? Well, what she taught me is, and I call this Aphrodite's theology of perfection, it's wholeness. We are whole. We are complete, however we are. Foibles, warts. We have to be treated as whole people with feelings and our ideas, our bodies, all of it is sacred. And we're in a process of evolving and becoming. And you have to accept people as their whole selves and then make sure they have what they need to evolve and grow as a way that's what divinity wants for us. That's my idea. This is not a perfect world where these things are honored by other people. However, that would be perfect and whole. And trustworthiness, the perfect trustworthiness is to say that I can only control me. That is the only thing I have. I can't make other people do what I want, but I can start with me. So basically it was a lesson of, if you want to see it in the world, it starts with you. I mean, that's how I can echo of things from other traditions, right?
But
Be what you want to see in the world. And if you want to be treated and have these things, start in your own life, in your own choices, in your own sphere of influence, even if that's relatively small, and do the best you can with your magic, with your choices, with your life, with your how you vote, how you spend your dollars, how you dispose of your garbage. You know what I'm saying? All the little mundane things. Try to be that, embody that. And the more you can do it and then share it a little bit at the edges, more and more as you're able, the better we all are. So that was it. That was the whole thing.
Oh my God, that is amazing. I mean, that should become a classic. That should be something everybody has on their wall, on their mirror, their little morning affirmations, because that is all what we are striving for. Oh my gosh, I can't look at the time. I mean, I have to look at the time. You have to come back, because now I have 700 more questions for you. But so will you come back another time?
Yes.
Very soon? Okay. In the meantime, I know my people, as I am, are just intrigued and want to know more about you. So tell everybody anything you have coming up, where they can find you, your books, your teachings, your websites.
Sure. Well, the fun news is that as of tomorrow, it's not quite live right this minute, but probably by the time this goes live into the world, as of November 6th, my store will finally have its own e-commerce website. We've only been brick and mortar before. It was called the Sojourner Whole Earth Provisions, and we're in Greenville, North Carolina. We will finally have an e-com site where people can purchase my book. And if you get your book from me, I'll sign it. We also have some promotional goodies of some posters of some of the diagrams and things in the book that are customized for this year, or the coming up year, 2022. And we're making that available free with the book. It's called the Great Work Wheel of the Year.
Nice.
We've got some other goodies, but also because my book is very practically applied, and there are many rituals and spells and all the things. And, you know, the best part of witchcraft is that we get our hands dirty all up in stuff, right?
Yep.
We have plant friends and stone friends and dressing candles and lotions and potions and waters and well, I run a store and I know where to get these things, and we do sell these things best we can. And I know people should get their own stuff from their own local retailers. Please go find your local witch shop and give those people your love. But for anyone who doesn't have that as an option, we'll be able to buy from my website, which is thesojo.com, thesojo.com. And soon you'll be able to pre-order and get all the goodies from me. We've also got a lot of art and things from the book. I did a lot of the own art for the book. I've got my copies of the art made in various applicable ways, like candle wraps, you know, to wrap around the outside of a sanctuary candle. I provided some of that imagery for the spells. All that stuff will be available. If you want to find out more about me and my book, that's heronmichelle.com. I also write for Patheos Pagan, and that's easy to find, witchonfire.net. And I have some book signings and things locally. If you happen to be in Eastern North Carolina, on December 11th, I'm doing a book discussion signing followed by a Yule party with some live music at St. Anne's Chapel and the Oak Grove Retreat Center in Tarboro, North Carolina on Saturday, December 11th from 5 to 10.
That is fabulous. So everybody, please check her out, Heron Michelle, her shop. Again, I'm excited just to learn more about you. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your magic. Thank you for sharing your beauty inside and out with the Witching Hour. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Heron Michelle.
Thank you.